Okay, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Clark. I'm the lead for the National Agricultural Producers Data Cooperative Project. The goal is to develop a national infrastructure for agricultural data, primarily serving our producers and their collaborators, including our extension agents and land-grant universities and other relevant institutions. So if you're not familiar with us, you can always visit our website, sign up. We'd be happy to include you in our activities. So we host these monthly webinars as a way to provide a venue for projects to introduce themselves to the community, talk about challenges, resources, just topics that are relevant to agricultural data. So today we're going to feature John McMullen, who's doing a fantastic job as Executive Director for the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub. And he's going to talk to us about what the hub is doing, some of their activities related to agricultural data and data standards. So John's going to present. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put those in the chat, because when we're done, we'll have a Q&A and also a bit of a discussion of different topics. So go ahead, John, take it away.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and thanks everybody for joining today. Hopefully you can see my slides, or at least my first slide.
Yes, I can see it.
Great. So really happy to be here and talk a little more about the work that we do around agricultural data and the community that we have built in that space. And very happy to be a partner with Jennifer and her team on this project as well. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Hub, I'll just give you a quick overview of who we are and what we do. We are part of a national network of 4 data innovation hubs that are funded by NSF and have been funded since 2015 as a part of this network. We are all focused on the same mission, which is really helping to build communities and convene events and bring folks together across different boundaries, institutional and sector boundaries, to have conversations and try to move things forward in different ways around data innovation. So we are part of this national network, as I said, and so we have access to the other hubs and can share resources and amplify each other's activities. But we are based here in the Midwest in a 12-state region. All of the hub's regions are based on the US Census definitions, and so that's where those boundaries come in, and why it may look a little different from how you may conceive what a Midwest state is. But this is who we are and where we're headed going forward. We, I think, are the most focused of the 4 hubs on ag and ag-related issues, other things like rural health and water quality, things like that, as you'll see in a moment. But the other hubs do have their own specialty areas related to ag and some of those areas as well. And so we do build off the work of other folks and bring those communities into the Midwest discussions as well. So here in the Midwest, this is a partnership of 6 universities led from the University of Illinois through the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. That's where I'm based. But we have other institutions across the Midwest who are collaborators on this NSF project, but also lots of other collaborators as well as a part of the different theme communities that we have. Today we're talking specifically about digital agriculture, but we have other themes that are really based on the regional strengths and community interests of folks in the Midwest. We also have a couple of cross-cutting themes that really are important to engage with each of these disciplinary focused areas. So things like data science education, how we help early career folks get involved in data innovations, training and workforce development are really important topics there. And then also cyber infrastructure and data sharing issues. Those both cut across each of these theme areas as well. And so we'll talk a bit more today about how those impact ag data in particular. But here in the Midwest community, our digital agriculture community is led by Iowa State. They're our collaborator for ag issues, but we have partners with University of North Dakota and University of Nebraska-Lincoln as longstanding co-collaborators in that digital agriculture space. So happy to see some folks on the call from those institutions as well. So I want to spend just a few minutes going through some of the work that the Hub has done historically and is continuing to move forward on in the ag data space. We'll talk about some other activities that are occurring in the Midwest that I want to make sure that folks are aware of and can potentially engage with. And we'll talk about some new activities that are just coming out now that we would be really happy to have folks on the call and those watching the recording participate in if you have interest in some of these topics. I do want to spend a few minutes near the end after we do Q&A, really opening the discussion up to interests and thoughts that folks on the call have around data challenges in ag and opportunities that you may see for collaborations moving forward. And so think about those as we're going through this year, and feel free to drop thoughts in the chat as well as we go along. So we have an existing engagement with the NAPDC team. I think the work that they're doing is really important to understand the community's needs in this space, and the Seed Fund program that you have is going to be very informative, I think, to help us get a sense of where things need to go in the future in terms of investments and gaps for the new research and new collaborations. So we're excited to be a part of this community and look forward to participating going forward as well. We also have a new working group that's a collaboration with the IEEE Standards Organization that I'll talk more about in a moment, but that I think lines up really well with the NAPDC group and the mission that you all have to really get a sense of what the community needs are. And so we'll get into that a little bit in a moment here. A couple of other things to mention that are relatively recent. The National Science Foundation earlier this year had a months-long activity called the Open Knowledge Network community building series of events. And this was a way to really start to think about specific use cases for the OKN projects that they have already funded, and think about where to take that project in the future, where there may be future funding opportunities. And so there were a number of use cases that we developed over the 6 months of that project. I was very fortunate to be on a working group with Ann Stapleton from USDA NIFA, who some of you may know, and thinking about a use case around food security and climate resilience, how some of those areas that are very interrelated may intersect in terms of federal funding opportunities. And so we can give you some pointers to that work if you're interested in that. But there were quite a few other use cases developed by the larger team around water and climate sustainability, resilient communities, rural engagement. So quite an interesting mix of work that occurred during that process, and there is a final report of that coming out as well that I could share with this group. So, I think that opportunity, some of the other more recent USDA funding opportunities around ag and climate resilience are emerging as well. And so we're trying to keep our eyes on what is new, what's coming out, where there are opportunities for the community to collaborate and receive new funding for some of these areas. Some of you may be familiar with a subgroup of our digital ag community that was funded through a related NSF program called the Big Data Spokes program. This was in alignment with the Big Data Hubs program, which funds the 4 hubs. And so this was a couple of rounds of funding that NSF provided for specific projects that were very focused on particular communities and the data needs that they had. And so one of the awards made in the Midwest was around digital agriculture, particularly through the lens of autonomous systems and sensor networks and other kinds of technology related resources for data collection and data analysis. And so this group was led out of University of North Dakota, but with, again, partners at Iowa State and Nebraska and elsewhere to really start to build that community of interest around autonomous systems. So that project has recently wrapped up. I'll talk momentarily about the one of the outputs from that group. But that was a very valuable way to start to think about the shared interests that the digital ag community has in the Midwest, and how data acquisition, data analysis can be achieved through some of these new kinds of systems. Going forward, next year, we do have some events coming up. One in particular, which is a relatively closed event, but it is, I think, going to be very interesting in terms of outputs that we can share with the community, is a workshop with a collection of some of the tribal colleges and universities in the Midwest and their affiliated tribal government leadership, looking at new ag innovation opportunities, particularly involving data, that they can use to continue to build their momentum in the digital ag space for projects that they run within their communities. And so there's I think a lot of interest there in terms of workforce development for students at the tribal colleges, but also community projects for the tribes to run and be more sustainable in terms of food security, but also technological advances as well. So we're excited about that partnership that was planned to run this year, but due to the pandemic, we had to move that to next year. But that's a very interesting collaboration with the Tribal Nations Research Group, which is one of our longstanding partners, UND, and a advanced farm project in North Dakota called Grand Farm, part of the Emerging Prairie group there. We also have Microsoft engaged in that, and they will be our host for that event as well. So we are still doing the planning for that event. If folks on the call are affiliated with a tribal college or university, we'd be happy to talk with you about that event. Or if you have collaborators from that area, we'd be happy to have you share that event with them. We previously have had quite a few events through the digital agriculture community. A lot of these have been hosted by Iowa State, which again is the lead institution for the digital ag community. So we've had a number of seminar series on data related concepts, ontologies, for example, and data analytics, things like that. There also has been a longstanding summer school opportunity for early career researchers, again, hosted by Iowa State, called the Midwest Big Data Summer School. Some of you may have even participated in that. But that has been a great way to get some hands-on experience with data science tools and data sets. Some of those sessions have been ag related historically. So that's been another good way to get folks engaged in the regional community that we have in the ag space. We recently have also hosted part of our Collaboration Cafe webinar series on data in food and ag, and I'll come back in a few moments here to talk about some upcoming sessions that we have planned for that series as well. But that is a monthly series around cross-institution, cross-sector collaboration in the Midwest. And so I do encourage folks to check that out going forward as well. All right, let us move on to the IEEE working group that I wanted to bring to folks' attention. This is a new partnership that is just getting started now. And so you have an opportunity to get involved very early on at this point. This is a collaboration with the IEEE Standards Association. This is a group within IEEE that helps to sort of understand community needs around standards and sort of shepherd that standards making process from the very early stage where we are with this group into more formalized working groups and standards development along the way. And so part of the goal here is to really explore the current state of ag data and interoperability of different kinds of data and look for opportunities for bringing together different use cases, different needs that people have into more focused approaches for dealing with those. That could take a standards movement down the road, maybe not, but that's sort of the track that we're on, is that exploratory phase at this point. And so that is a partnership between the Hub and IEEE, as well as the Illinois Ag Tech Accelerator, which is a VC-funded project that's based here in Central Illinois. So Jack Mark, who's the director of that program, is the co-lead for that project and has been great about bringing in industry partners to collaborate on this as well. So within this group, we're very interested in the needs of small producers in particular. So not necessarily commodity crops, but specialty crops and other organizations that are related to that kind of production and the supply chains associated with them. So this is kind of an end-to-end look that we're trying to do here, from the on-farm producer stage of things up through the supermarket shelves. What are the different impacts that data have along that life cycle and along that supply chain? Where are there challenges that people are facing? Where are there opportunities for synergies and efficiencies to come in and think about ways to maybe optimize some of that, or have folks benefit from the work that happens earlier on in that chain. Part of the title here about equitable agricultural ecosystems is really around the idea that we want to ensure that smaller producers and folks who are not, large agribusiness folks really retain ownership and control of their data and have a voice in future standards making and in future activities going forward. I know that this group is very interested in that segment of the market, and so I think that is a good place where we're in alignment with each other. Having that focus on the small producer is really important to the work that we're doing with this group. So at this phase, we are just getting that group started, and we have a workshop coming up at the beginning of December. We'll go ahead and put the links to the working group and that event in the chat for you. So we will be kicking off this working group at that December meeting. That will be an in-person meeting, potentially some online participation as well. But really spending the day having discussions, having breakout sessions to really drill down onto what the current pain points and challenges and opportunities are for folks across that spectrum of the supply chain. This is not a meeting where you will go and sit back and listen to speakers. This is really an event where you can bring your opportunities and challenges and make sure that your voice is part of that conversation around ag data. And so, you know, we encourage folks who have an interest in working in that space and, you know, bringing very different perspectives to participate either in the workshop or in the working group events going forward. This is a 2-year timeline that IEEE uses for this program. And so we have, you know, quite a bit of time that we can spend understanding the landscape, understanding the needs of stakeholders, and thinking about ways to move things forward from that perspective. So really, you know, the outputs here that we're interested in are things like what are the best practices that folks are already using for some of these data challenges? What are some guidelines that may have been developed along the way here? Maybe developing some of those ourselves as outputs from the working group activities. But really trying to, again, bring in the different stakeholders and understand what those challenges are. If we get to the standards making phase, you know, we might think about different kinds of interoperability mechanisms or even certificates that would help with workforce development or other approaches to rolling out some of these technologies. So we're very open at this point to what direction this goes. It really is going to be driven by the needs and the interest of this community. And so again, encourage you to participate in this going forward. I think in terms of other outputs from this, you know, we are in pretty regular conversation with the USDA and NSF folks who are writing the new solicitations for funding programs. And so, you know, part of this conversation is bringing to them the input that you all have about the challenges that you're facing and thinking about, okay, are there opportunities for those kinds of federal funders to develop new programs to address those needs as well. So, you know, we wanted to use this process to communicate those needs to that audience as well. All right. Happy to talk more about that activity if you folks have questions later, but I will move on to a couple of other topics here. I wanted to sort of broaden out from the hub specific activities and make sure that folks were aware of some other work that has been underway in the Midwest around ag and technology. So one example in particular is the National Science Foundation has a program called the AI Institutes program, which is really a large-scale funding program to do center size and scale activities that are collaborations across different institutions. And so you'll see here 4 institutes in the Midwest that NSF has funded over the past couple of years. You may be familiar with one or more of those already. But these are great ways, I think, to get some of these very specialized use cases and ag-related issues out on the table with folks who are coming at this from both the research, academic research side of things, but also with a use-focused lens. So thinking about how to, you know, address these problems in the real world through research and through technology transfer and new innovations. And so definitely would encourage folks to explore these institutes if you have interest in more of the AI and machine learning space. Each of these has their own, you know, spin on what digital ag means to their particular collaborators. And you can see that there's a very wide range of institutions affiliated with these. The institutions that are bold here in the first position are the lead institutions, but these are all collaborative awards. And so there's multiple participating institutions affiliated with these. And I think, some of these are very, very ag focused. Some others like Icicle and AI Edge, ag is just one dimension of the work that they're doing. And so, you know, thinking about the ways that ag data and AI may intersect with other related areas, climate change, water quality, things like that. These are interesting places where you can see those intersections and start to look across the different research communities that are exploring those for synergies amongst them. So we have all of these Midwest AI Institutes available on our website. You can check out our list of regional activities for that. And these folks are all very interested in collaborating with people who are working within these spaces, whether you're a funded partner or institution on these awards or not. They want to hear from others in the community about the work that you're doing. So definitely reach out to any of them that are working in areas that relate to your interests. All right, let's talk quickly about some other possibilities for engagement with the Midwest Hub. I mentioned the Big Data Spoke project led by UND a few moments ago. One of the other outputs of that group is a very recent special section in a Chronoby journal, which is focused on ag data ownership and privacy in particular, but it does have a even broader spread than that. So there are 9 articles within that special section. So, again, I think those are all very relevant to the folks on this call, and exploring those, you may have existing collaborators who are co-authors on those articles, but lots of very interesting work done as a part of that Spoke Award project. This is work really from one of the workshops that they put on. And so, these are the formal evolution of those presentations into journal articles from that, but there also are videos from that meeting available on YouTube as well, and we can provide the link to that as well. So again, definitely lots of interesting perspectives there. There's some use cases, there's some best practice work that was done. So I think, exploring that and potentially having some of those folks on this call in the future would be a great fit. Great, and I want to thank my colleague Armgard Hawken, who is on the call as well, for handling some of the questions in the chat. Keep the questions coming. We would be happy to talk more about anything that you're curious about. I also wanted to mention that we have a community blog on our website. This is a project that our science communication intern team is helping us develop. We've had this program for more than a year now, where we have 3 science writing interns developing stories about the folks in our community who are innovators in a particular space or are working on particular projects that are relevant to our community. So I just have some screen caps here of 4 stories that are ag related that the students have been working on the past year or so. This is a great way to really amplify the work that's happening across the Midwest in not only digital ag, but other areas of data science in our theme areas as well. But I want to encourage folks on the call, if you are aware of new projects that have been funded or folks who are doing really innovative work in the DigAg space, definitely reach out to us and we'd be happy to consider writing about that work and publishing that through that community blog. That gets shared out through our newsletter and through our social media as well. So we have a pretty good reach and can help you share that work with the larger regional community if that's of interest to you. All right. I wanted to talk just a minute about our Collaboration Cafe webinar series that I mentioned previously. This is a series that we started last year, so we're more than a year into it at this point. We had a lot of community input over the past couple of years about the need for ways to bring together people from multiple disciplines and multiple institutions to really collaborate on large-scale funding proposals. A lot of times those grant projects are really driven by one institution, and you know, there's interest in collaborating with other partners potentially for these things, particularly as they become center scale or you know, very large opportunities. And so there was an interest in the community in having the hub be that focal point and help bring people together across institutional boundaries, across sector boundaries, to explore, you know, new collaborations that could result in proposal development. And so we developed this series as a venue to do that. You know, it has been very successful in terms of bringing in those different communities. We very often will have prior awardees of the solicitation that we explore for each month on the call to talk about their experiences in developing the proposal and how those collaborations have been evolving. We very often will have program directors from the federal funding agencies on the call to talk about, you know, the goals of the agency in terms of funding this work and potential new opportunities there. So it has been a great way to really get a sense of the pulse of the community in some of these spaces and what other folks are doing who have already been funded there. So we have the webinar series for that. You can find that on our website. We also have some related resources around that program. We have a Slack community, for example. We have our playlist of all of the recordings from that series. We have a shared Google Drive that has different documents, including the prior awards that have been made in the Midwest for the programs that we look at. So there's a lot of interesting information, I think, for folks who are trying to explore where to get funding for your digital ag work, along with other topics as well, of course. But we do plan to continue to explore ag opportunities on this series in the future. And so, you know, we encourage you to come check that out when you have interest there. So I think related to that, I wanted to mention that as a regional organization, we do engage with folks on proposals in a couple of different ways. We have a pretty lightweight process for letters of collaboration. If you are interested in having the hub community engage with you on a particular proposal, we're happy to have that conversation. We don't require any funding to do that. We can add your project, for example, to our communications process and make sure that it gets amplified to the larger community, help you identify participants or collaborators for things. That's sort of our baseline for helping new projects get engaged with the regional community. We also, though, can be a larger collaborative partner as well. We can be a co-PI, we can be a sub-awardee, we can be a consultant on projects as well. And so if there are places where in your project you need help with outreach and engagement and community building, communications, that's the work that we specialize in. And so we'd be happy to talk about working with you in a funded capacity to help, you know, do that kind of work for you. So we have a portfolio of service offerings that we could share with folks who are interested, but we're always happy to start those conversations with folks. All right, so just to wrap up here, I wanted to talk about a couple of events that are coming up. One I've already mentioned is the IEEE event on December 5th. That will be an in-person event here in Champaign at the iHotel. As I said, we're hoping to have a hybrid component to that as well for folks who are not able to travel. but the link again for that is in the chat if you scroll up a bit. And for our November Collaboration Cafe webinar, we will be looking at the FAR Fellows Program, which is an early career program for new researchers in ag. And so we'll have some of those fellows joining the call to talk about their experience in that program. So if you know early career folks who are interested in that, definitely encourage them to join, and they can hear more about the details of that program on that call. So we do anticipate next year, we will not have a cafe meeting in December, but next year we'll again continue that series, and we'll definitely have more ag-related topics and solicitations that we talk through on that call. We've had USDA program directors on that call, as well as NSF folks as well, and so we encourage your submission of topics that are of interest to you or solicitations that you want to learn more about. Feel free to send those along to us, and we'd be happy to add those to our schedule of upcoming topics as well. Just on the right side of this slide here is our, if you go to our website, you'll see the Get Involved menu. And so this is just the menu open to show you some of the other opportunities that we have. So the regional activities option here is where I mentioned that the AI Institutes and other non-hub related activities that are in the Midwest are available to explore. But we have other community activities as well that folks may be interested in. We have a data science student group community where we bring in different student groups to learn about their experiences and their best practices. So if you have ag students who are interested in data related activities, and they have a informal group or a registered student organization, we'd be happy to talk with them. We have a Midwest Carpentries community that's trying to build capacity for carpentries instruction across the region. And so that's a great venue for folks to talk about carpentries instruction, and particularly, about ag related course content, curriculum materials for that theme as well. All right, so that is pretty much the content that I had for you. I'm going to open it up to the Q&A at this point, but I also wanted to make sure we have some time to think about challenges that you all are facing around data and ag these days. What are the things that are keeping you up at night? What are the things that you're excited about moving forward on? Where are there places that folks in the Midwest could collaborate to maybe address some of these challenges? What would that collaboration look like to you? And where, what are the projects that you think are at the right stage to really help move forward? What needs partners and what needs, community effort to move things forward? I'd like to try to have that conversation with folks who are ready to talk about any of that today, but also happy to take questions at this point as well. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other and have a conversation.
Okay, if anyone has a question or something they'd like to ask John, go ahead and raise your hand, and we can call on you. Armgard's been really good at answering questions in the chat. She's on it. So there's lots of cool links there with answers to questions. One thing I wanted to ask, which I guess is related to this, is what's kind of the future of the digital ag group within the Midwest Hub? Sort of like where do you see that group sort of going in the future, or what does NSF want to see from that focus area?
Yeah, great question. And I should say that our timeline, I mentioned that we have been funded from NSF since 2015. We have about a year and a half or so left on this particular award. And so we are looking now for opportunities to extend the work that we do in terms of the sort of regional community building and collaboration building going forward. And so, you know, there's some opportunities from NSF that could fund that. There's some opportunities from USDA potentially to do that. But we definitely are interested in talking with the community more about that. We've had, you know, a set of existing partners in place since 2015. And a lot of those folks, I think, would like to continue in a role that is a leadership role like that. But there's a lot of other people who have come on board since then, you know, along the way here in the past couple of years, or even more recently, who are very excited about what's happening in this space, and who, you know, I think would like to have opportunities to collaborate on new funding going forward that may include that kind of community building. So, you know, there's lots of folks who are wanting to do research projects, which is not really what we do, but there's also, I think, folks who would like to sustain that agricultural community and think about ways to grow that out in different spaces. So it could be growing into different parts of that supply chain that historically haven't been, you know, well represented in the community. Could be, you know, growing in different technology directions. Could be growing into related areas like climate resilience or rural development, for example. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for those folks who are you know, relatively new to the hub, but are excited about, you know, how to grow this into a continuing active community going forward. I think there's some opportunities with the NSF Regional Innovation Engines program, which is a new program this year. They have just taken in their sort of planning grant size proposals last month for that program. And in January, they will take in the proposals for the full scale track of that program, which is a 10-year funding horizon and is a lot of money to build out those regional sort of economic development focused activities that are really driven by you know, research, but use case based research that is really trying to solve community problems and challenges in rural areas, in areas that NSF has not funded very well historically. And so that particular program, I think, is one where there could be quite a bit of work in the ag space as a part of those larger regional economic development awards. I think the Commerce Department also has a kind of similar program that was made as a part of the Build Back Better bill. They were sort of first to market with that program. And so I think that they are a little bit further along, but it's a same kind of concept where it's very focused on workforce development and economic development as the beneficiary of the underlying academic research in technology. And so, you know, those kinds of programs, I think, are going to be very impactful in the Midwest. But, you know, I think some of the specific programs that NSF and USDA, NIFA, and other agencies, you know, are ramping up are also opportunities for collaboration there.
Great, thank you. That was really helpful. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that going forward, as a hub, we're actually looking at a lot of these, our priority areas that we have kind of falling under the umbrella of smart and resilient communities, because a lot of them overlap. And so we'd be really eager to, if anybody has solicitations in mind that you know, kind of possibly like how ag fits under that, you know, resilience to climate change, you know, flooding, you know, anything ag related in that space, we'd be really eager to partner. if anybody is looking for developing, proposals for that, or anything else in the ag space. Doesn't necessarily need to be, climate resilient, but just going forward, we'd be happy to anybody to reach out to us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Armgard. And, we talked today about our ag community, but for the other priority areas that we have, there's, similar work that has been done. And so, as Armgard said, we're looking for synergies across those spaces. And, in particular, water quality and ag go very well together. There's a lot of overlap between those communities. Same thing with the resilient community space in general, along with health, for example, rural health and ag are very tightly coupled in a lot of areas. And so, there definitely are opportunities, I think, to build on all the work that those communities have been doing and have that agriculture perspective represented in that mix as well.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat to a relatively new center in Nebraska on resilience, particularly in agriculture. And its main focus is really ecosystems, but it also has links to One Health and rural development, rural productivity. So it might be a good connection. They have sort of historical NSF funding, so it aligns well with what you're talking about.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Go ahead, Anna.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation and for all the information. Yes, I have just a couple of questions. Like one is about the Midwest Carpentry, the course development. So I work as assistant director at the AF Farms for data management. And one of the things that we were interested in is finding out what are the opportunities for course development around the area of kind of like the importance of coding standards when developing code. And so we just wanted to see if this course has already been developed or already exists, and if not, if it can be proposed. So that would be one thing. And another thing is I just wanted to say that one of the interests that I personally have is with relation to data privacy in the agriculture world, and how the data flows and who is actually, having, do the farmers actually keep the data, and under which circumstances, or does it necessarily belong to the technology that collects data and to the corporate industry that produces technology. So these are kind of some of the topics that are of particular interest to me. And so these are two unrelated things, but I just wanted to bring them up in case John or anybody else has any comment or suggestion or Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Anna. And I can get started here. Other folks certainly can join in as well. I'll put the link to the special issue of Agronomy Journal that I mentioned earlier in the chat for folks, because that does have some work on data privacy and data ownership, particularly of small producers, I think, as well. And so that is one starting place, but there definitely is a long-standing concern, I think, of small producers that a major equipment provider may own the data for their actual farm due to various reasons, right? Or can I control my data? Can I do things with my data without getting permission from somebody else, right? There's all those kind of things that have been around for a long time, and I think that they're sort of coming to the point of resolution in some cases. In the near term, but definitely, I think that is part of what the NAPDC is interested in as well, in terms of building that infrastructure, who owns the different pieces and who controls the use of the data, the data governance issues there, I think are really important as well. Let me just quickly address your question about the Carpentries community. So for those who are not familiar with that organization, the Carpentries has a longstanding software carpentry and data carpentry set of programs, as well as library carpentry and potentially high performance computing going forward. And so these are training programs that are developed by the community. So they're open source and the content is able to be modified by the needs of the community. And so, we are really focused on building the instructor capacity in the Midwest so that people can ramp up their training on their own campuses. But we are very interested in the idea of incorporating domain-specific or topic-specific curricular materials into that core underlying curriculum for those programs. So for example, in the data carpentry curriculum, you have very general skill set development around different kinds of tools. And so if we could bring in ag data, for example, for folks who are working in that particular space and wanting to learn some of those tools, having some ag related content that would be more familiar to them than, health statistics or, some other discipline that they don't work in, we'd like to continue to build out that kind of content. And so that is part of the work that we're engaged in there, beyond the capacity building piece. So, if folks are interested in contributing content or data, for examples, we'd be happy to talk about that. But if you just have interest in seeing that developed, let us know that as well so that we know what that demand looks like across the region.
All right, thank you.
So I think, John, you wanted to save some time for discussion. So since we have about half hour left, you want to shift to those questions because it could, depending on responses, it could take a while.
Yeah, and I'm happy to wrap up a bit early too, if folks would like to. But yeah, I wanted to, just poll the group for the challenges that folks are facing, the areas that you think are really important for groups like the NAPDC and the hub to focus on. Where can we help you make some progress with challenges that you're facing? How can we amplify the work that you're doing? And conversely, if you're doing something new and exciting, let's hear about that and how we may be able to help you find collaborators or participants for that as well. So what are people dealing with right now? We heard from Anna about data ownership and training. What other topics are people really grappling with at the moment?
So I can start and other people can step in. One of the things that I find challenging is the question of sustainability for cyber infrastructure, particularly in the ag space. I think ag producers generally they really need to focus on return on investment and how they spend their time and effort. Just managing a farming or ranching or ag producer operation is a big job, and they just don't have a lot of time and effort available. So anything that we can do to make data management or getting information from data that's relevant to their decision processes is of high value, and trying to make that argument clear when we're building tools around data and data management, any training that we offer, really trying to focus it on decisions and how to make better decisions. I just find that often it's challenging to do that, right? To kind of figure out what producers need and in a way that they can access it and they have time to do that, right? They're always have to be so focused on bottom line issues. But I always find that kind of tricky. It's like, yes, we can provide materials that we think would be useful and helpful, and it's just getting their attention and time is tough. And that doesn't always match with what researchers would like to do, or different timelines, right? Producers are always thinking about the now and maybe short term, and it just sometimes the timelines for projects don't match up. It's just always a tricky challenge to kind of square that circle.
Absolutely. And I want to talk more about the sustainability piece in a minute, but yeah, I think that's really important because the time is so limited, particularly in a small operation. There isn't, you know, a CIO of this farm, right? There's you know, a very small group of people who are working every day to actually produce the crop rather than play with the data. And so you know, having the bandwidth to even participate in some of these activities, I think, is a real challenge for people. And so, you know, we're trying for our IEEE activity to, you know, provide some support to people where we can, and help them, you know, be represented in that activity. But it's definitely a challenge. I did want to put in the chat here a link to an NSF program that came out this year called the Pathways to Open Source Ecosystems. And this is not really addressing the small producer question, but it's addressing that question of how do you sustain CI resources beyond the life of that initial funding opportunity that got them started, right? You know, so you can get a grant to develop a piece of software or a website, and then what happens? It often just goes away because there's no long-term sustainability for it. And so, you know, NSF recognized that they've been making investments in CI for, you know, 2 decades at this point, and there is not a lot of organic sustainability for some of that work because, you know, it has to be, you know, there's people that you have to pay to do that. And so they came up with this program to have that, you know, have some support for that transition from an early stage project to something that is sustainable by a larger community. And they've gone through 1 round of funding for that so far, and there's a 2nd round in progress now. So, you know, exploring that as one mechanism, I think, is important. But, you know, I don't know if USDA has anything in that kind of vein, but I think it's really important to understand the costs associated with maintaining software, curating data sets, you know, just keeping the lights on in some of these resources that are valuable, but will go away if they don't have funding for people to actually do that work. So, you know, I think that's a role again for the hub in terms of communicating those needs to funders and saying, look, you know, there's a lot of value from the community perspective for these things, but we need some way to sustain them going forward.
That's really cool. Anyone else have a challenge or something they'd like to share with the community? So I saw a note in the chat from Ben Craker at the Ag Gateway. They're also developing and interested in working on data standards around agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll make sure to get his group connected for the December event, because I think they'd have some real interesting knowledge and experience to share, because they work with producers sort of on the ground. So
great, thanks for that. And I know that Ben has dropped off, but that's great.
Mm-hmm.
We would be happy to talk with them. The other group that I think there are opportunities to work with and that we would like to grow our relationship with is the extension agency
Mm-hmm.
folks that the land grants in the 12 states. And so, you know, I think that can be part of that link between the academic world and the small producer world that you talked about, where, they may not have a whole lot of time to engage in research projects or deployment things, but they, can probably talk to their extension agent for a little bit about what's on the horizon, what may be good opportunities for them to get involved in. And so, having that functional group be a conduit for, that information, I think is one thing that we are trying to explore.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those are really key. They're kind of like the glue that helps connect the academics with the ag producers, and they have incredible knowledge, and they're always super busy and super overwhelmed with tasks, but they're great. They're great to get engaged with. So.
Jennifer, I don't know if you
Yes.
are able at this point to speak about your seed fund program and whether you've, folks who have received those awards have
Mhm.
learned anything. I think that a lot of that was supposed to be about, understanding community needs and things. So
Mhm.
are things farther enough along at this point to talk about any of that, or is it still too early?
I think it's still a little too early, but I know that I can mention some things. So the group at Purdue University and Open Ag Technology Systems, Oats Center, they've been attending certain events, and they have a survey they've been giving out to people in the community that ask them specifically about their needs. So I'm hoping to get some report from them later this semester, if not early next, with sort of what the community has been saying about their challenges around data. The other group is the Market Maker program, and especially focusing on specialty crops, because that's an area that sometimes we tend to forget. It's kind of like the smaller producers. So we're hoping to get information from the specialty crops people about what their particular needs are. And so I hope I'll have input from them within the next couple of months. And I'll be sharing any products from those seed grants and posting them on our webpage. So I'm as eager as you are to get that information. So I'll be sure to share with you.
That's great. Yeah, and in particular for the IEEE working group, that's the kind of data and evidence that we want to accumulate, is those stories and data points from people who are actively working in that space. And so, the more that we learn, the better we can represent their needs on that group.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yep. So I will share that.
If I don't know if I should raise hand or
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So no, I'm just it's very interesting what you had mentioned, Jennifer, about I was kind of thinking about like what is it that producers need? What is it that they need, and what is it that could help them get some quick insights into what is happening that would be practical, that would be not too cumbersome, that is doesn't require too much cost to implement or time, and like some kind of like feedback loop that. And so I was just wondering if, like, I'm not sure about the community standards survey that you mentioned. Maybe they are already inquiring about those needs, but I'm just not sure if there is a survey of that type that already exists, that was conducted and somebody has done kind of like either interviews or focus groups with producers that would provide insight into what are, like what are kind of like applications that can potentially be developed that would be kind of like some kind of like quick tools or easy to use functions. So I don't know if this community standards survey covers that area or.
I don't know, but I can send you the contact information for the person who's running the survey. So then you can ask them like what, if that's included in there, or if they've, just by providing the survey, if they've gotten any feedback in terms of, especially on the standards piece, I
Mhm.
can certainly put you in touch with them, and they can help you out with that. Yeah, no, I agree. That's important information.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I think that's about it for today. Thank you so much, John, for your presentation. We'll record and have available on our webpage, as well as if you want to share slides, just send them and I'll post those as well.
Sounds great. I will definitely share the slides, and so those will be available to folks watching the recording and joining today. Thanks everybody for participating. Great to speak with you all, and thanks Jennifer for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. And thank you, Armgard. You're great with the chat questions. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone.